we are going to continue to see the rise of the casual music creator, music where creation in and of itself is the fulfilling side of it. It's not even the output necessarily. It's the process that you're doing in a community. Anything that gets people to engage with creativity, I said this earlier, I don't give a shit what it is. If it lets you feel like you are surprising yourself with something that came out of you, like that's where real engagement comes from, regardless of what you then do with that, whether it's a product or it's just something you did for fun.
Daniel, Rowland, and me has an amazing talk about music production tools. As head of partnerships and strategy for Landr, he has an incredible insight of what's happening. We talk about the past, the present, and the future, and how producers, songwriters, and artists will navigate the tools of creating music in the future. I hope you enjoyed this one. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Sound Conditions Podcast. Daniel, Rowland, welcome to the studio.
Awesome, man. Great to be here.
You have had an extremely interesting career. You come from production, mixing, mastering, and you've also been a professor for many years, and then you also head of partnerships and strategy, head of partnerships at Landr, which I think is really, really interesting. Landr is obviously a company that's been present for a few years, well, quite a lot of years, and sort of been one of the main innovators in the production space. So what we're going to talk about today is your work there, your work as an engineer, as a producer, but also talking about tools, AI, partnerships. So it's going to be a really interesting story. But for the people who don't know you, and from my brief intro there, could you tell me who are you and what do you do?
That is a great question. I don't know anymore. It changes so often. But yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I come from the creative side initially of the industry, right? So I've started as a music producer, musician for 10 years, making my living doing that. And eventually went to college and got a bachelor's and a master's degree in music technology. And that kind of led me down the path to producing and engineering and teaching as well. And so I've been doing that for 32 years, something like that, crazy as that is. And then maybe 12 years ago, I started getting into the technology side, actually helping to build some of the tech that kind of we all use to make music, predominantly with Landr, but with some other companies as well. And that's kind of what I do today. I still teach college full-time back in Nashville and remotely, of course. I'm head of strategy and partnerships at Landr, as you said. And I work on a lot of music. These days, more mixing and mastering strictly because I don't have the time anymore to work with bands, with artists, because a production can take an eternity or it cannot. It just depends. But I kind of treat startups and technology like artists now. I love working with new tech and people who are kind of, beginning their journey on that side of things and helping here and where I can.
Yeah, when I was looking through your credits, I got a bit starstruck. So well done. Interesting career you've had in the creative side and on this side. So what does exactly you do at Landr? What does head of strategy and partnership mean?
Yeah, well, I've been at Landr now for 9 years, right? So Landr is about 10 and a half years old. So I was there basically right on the first year anniversary. So I've been there for a minute. And as anybody that's listening to this, if you're involved in a startup, you kind of do everything, right? Yeah. So regardless of what your job title is. So I have definitely moved through roles at that company. And even now as quote unquote head of strategy and partnerships, I get to touch a lot of different stuff from assisting with product development and marketing, and I kind of am the face of the company, and then I go out and speak at all the events and have for years, which is something I'm sure we'll talk about because it means I've been talking to people about AI for almost a decade in music. So it's been interesting to see the shifting perceptions and some things that haven't changed in that regard. So a lot of that, I help direct kind of mergers and acquisitions. I direct kind of where we're going with our products, and a lot of what I do is partnerships. So figuring out companies that are complementary to us and that we are complementary to help expand our user base by exposing them to other products that we think are cool and by bringing other products into the Landr ecosystem, whether that's through licensing or, like I said, acquisition or just other kind of co-marketing partnerships. So it's not a world that I come from at all when I started with this company. So I've had to learn. I had done no business at all. I was a touring musician and music producer. So a lot of these are skills I've just had to pick up over the years. And I think I'd like to think I kind of bring my own unique take on it, kind of not coming from it, not having an MBA or something like that. And that's what I do for Landr.
One of my big passions when I was young and in my early to mid 20s were production tools.
Man.
It is one of the most fun things to ever work
Toys.
with. And I've not, luckily I still manage a few producers and I get to sort of tag along, and I have a few friends who are doing really well in the plugin space. So I'm quite informed. But what's happened the last 5 years from when I stopped producing music to now, the development has just been immense. And what would you say is the biggest difference that happened in the last few years in production tools and music?
Well, it's interesting. So as anybody that knows me knows I am obsessed with that side of things. It's really how I got into the music industry, was being the guy who knew everything that was out there, either up and coming under the radar and or established tools. And I could go work with the Adrian Blues or Trent Reznor's or people like that. And I could tell them about stuff they didn't necessarily maybe know about, and vice versa. So I love that stuff. But you're right. There's been an accelerated rate of development in that space. And I think a lot of it is from the kind of the rise of the independent production tools programmer and creator, right? So you're not waiting on kind of the established players to innovate and put something out to market. We've just seen this massive influx of, mom and pop, whatever you want to call them, 1-person, 2-person companies that are just putting out really boutique, innovative, not just, sound effects, but virtual instruments, everything. And in some case, DAWs, right? Like it's just anything and everything you could want in that space. And it's been fascinating to follow, but almost impossible to keep up with, as you can imagine.
It's so interesting to see like how much these tools matter. Like you might think as an outsider, like, okay, how many different tools and things can you actually get in this space? Like it's just audio, it's just music. But like we had, it's a while now, but one of my best friends is called Hannes Andersson. He's now CEO of Oak Sound, and sort of their journey as well, like just a small boutique company in Finland.
You say Oak Sound?
Amazing.
I use them every single day.
Yeah. But like, and their story is also just like, it's just one amazing clever nerd just sitting for 3 years programming, like nothing is launched, everything. And then there's like 2 other guys, hey, can we help you sell this? And just seeing how that's sort of taking the world by storm is so fascinating, because at the end of the day, music is emotions, it's stories, and people really, I would say, underestimate the importance of these production tools, mixing tools, to get that story up and make that presentable and clear. And it might be details and details and details, but those characteristics really matter.
No, and Oak is a great example because they make a few products. Obviously, they came out with one a couple of weeks ago, but Soothe, was their kind of first entry into the market, and that's something I use it literally every day. I'm mastering a Star Wars project today, and Soothe is on every single channel of that, and all pretty much always is with everything. But it's something that 25 years ago, it would have been 20 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago, it would have been very difficult for them to build a business off of effectively 1 or 2 products, right? But now, as we've seen, I'm sure we may get into this later when it comes through the lens of AI, but as we widen the funnel for more creators to come in and more content to be made, there are some potential downsides to that when it comes to, it being more competitive on the artist side of things and the creator side of things. It means there's more people using technology to make music, right? So it opens up opportunities for some of these companies to exist with fairly niche products that they're doing stuff nobody else was doing, right? And they can build a business off of that. And I absolutely love that. So great example, man.
So can you tell me a bit about the Landr story? Because, I work a lot within music tech, and I try to follow along as much as I can. And sort of Landr for me was first introduced, I believe, like 5 years ago, with sort of the mastering side. And then it was a bit because I knew it was existing, but I had like, okay, this is what Landr does. And then when I sort of revisited not too long ago, I was like, oh, okay, something has happened.
Yeah.
Okay, can you just walk me through the journey like in a couple of minutes?
Yeah, man. And I think this is really a great example for anybody out there, again, that's doing their own thing, entrepreneur, early stage startup. So Landr started as a project at Queen Mary University over in the UK, and eventually made its way over to Montreal. And it was initially an AI mixing technology, right? That was going to be used in married with like live sound consoles. So you would go to a live show and it would kind of automated mix the show, have it ready for people when they left, that kind of a thing, right? And it eventually, this is before I was even with the company, it pivoted into mastering, right? For a variety of different reasons. And great. And that was what the company intended to be, which was an AI machine learning based mastering company. And so that was already one pivot, but like any business, you kind of have to listen to your users about what they want, what they're willing to pay for, and what they're engaged with. And that led Landr to become a bunch of different stuff. I mean, so our users, we were doing mastering, right? Which is kind of, most people probably know, almost the last stage of the music production process before you release something. At least that's what it traditionally has been defined as. So people wanted us to distribute music. Okay, we'll distribute music because that's adjacent to mastering. And then they kept asking for you were already with you doing this. Why don't you also sell samples, right? Why don't you also make plugins? Why don't you also... So it became this thing where we ended up building this kind of the broadest, hands down, end-to-end creative platform in the industry that kind of wraps around your DAW to give it superpowers, and just kept tacking things on based upon feedback from our users. We now have a massive educational platform that's attached to it. And, long story short, the problem that we stumbled into solving, and I don't even think it was really intentional at the beginning, is that the music creator tools industry has many, many awesome companies in it, but it's very fragmented, right? You can get a great distributor or a great plugins company or a great this, that, or the other. But if you are coming fresh into the music industry, you have to figure out which one of those you want, and then pay for separate subscriptions and some perpetual licenses and all this stuff. It's just it's a lot of friction, right? So we try to solve that by kind of putting everything under, you could ever need to make music, DAW, everything else under one umbrella to get you going and kind of follow you along on your journey. And that's been our positioning, and it's worked really well.
Yeah, and it also seems like there's a very clear sort of value proposition in who you're going for, at least in my objective. Like if you compare, let's say Landr to BandLab, for example, that's very B2C in the aspect that there's probably not a lot of professionalism behind the people using the platform, but it's a way for them to engage with music for free or very easily. And,
sure.
And sort of the products and services you provide at Landr seems to cater much more to professionals that actually trying to live for it. Or you can correct me if I'm wrong. That's at least how I see it.
I mean, professional, it's a relative term, right? Professionals to BandLab is awesome, right? But professionals relative to BandLab kind of is even higher up the funnel than we are, right? As far as the breadth of audience that they're addressing. Yeah, we don't offer a DAW. We don't make a DAW, right? We complement. Our assumption is, and this is a blessing and a curse to be totally honest with you, that you're already using one. And, kind of outside the BandLab ecosystem, your Abletons, your Pro Tools, et cetera, et cetera. So that narrows our market, but also it's people who are more willing to pay for tools, right? Because they want to kind of level up beyond the free stuff. And you're totally right. I mean, that's where we typically meet people.
So 5 years ago, when I was introduced to Landr, the mastering was, as far as I know, the product. What happened there? Because obviously, when you look at your title, Head of Partnerships and Strategy, you must have been involved in sort of some of the developments that happened with these things. Could you walk me through, was there a discussion in the company say, okay, these are the requests users are having, and how did you go about starting acquiring these things or partnering? What was the process?
Yeah, great. So, so it was definitely, there was clearly a strategy behind it, though I don't think we even at the time knew how broad we would go with that strategy. But yeah, to move beyond mastering, because mastering, Landr helped. And there's people who love this and people who hate this, kind of redefine what that term even means. Mastering typically is the thing, you do your song, you pay a mastering engineer $100, $200, $300 or whatever to master it, and it goes out to streaming services. Well, once mastering is something you can do whenever you want, and there's not necessarily a cost associated with every time you do something, you can master demos, you can master drum beats, we have people who don't use Landr on anything but drums, right? And some people who use it on their whole mix. It's like whatever you want to use it for, you can. And that's another interesting thing for anybody developing tech. That the coolest part about it is what people end up using it for that you never have foreseen. People use it on their drum shot. They've on their gunshot sound effects for films, and that's all they use it for. It's like, okay, I didn't envision that. So, but anyway, so it was a strategy to kind of expand, and the problem with that is as a startup you have limited resources, right? So how do you go broad with something when you honestly probably can't afford to build out all of these different tools? So in our case, we did, first of all, of course, step by step. We didn't just add everything all at once. We tried to go after the things that we thought were kind of the lowest hanging fruit, both in user adoption, the potential for that, but also in the lift on the technology side for us. So, and that involved, again, some building stuff out for us and then licensing technology. I mean, I could sample. I'll take one example of what we do, right? So we have 2 million plus samples on our platform that you can access, right? Some of those we've commissioned. So they're exclusive relationships that we have with producers. They provide us their samples, they get paid or they get residuals on those samples, and we have those, nobody else does. But that's difficult to build a massive library doing that and quite expensive, which is why no one really does. You can also go out and license samples from a lot of sample libraries that are out there. So we might have some of the same samples that, let's say, Splice has, but we've also then over the years built up our own unique catalog that makes us different, just like Splice has done. So, I mean, there's things you can do to kind of kickstart, as you kind of sprinkle on your own unique offerings. And we've done that now across a few different lines, plugins and other things as well. And our educational platform, we have stuff we've done in-house and then things that we've licensed out to make it a complete offering for people.
That's very interesting. As you said, I think a few minutes ago, the music industry, especially in this space, seems to be very factionalized. And how I normally see it is you have these big companies, that's Waves, Universal Audio, and then you have these small companies that sort of have their own thing. What I haven't seen a lot is what Landr is doing, is these partnerships where you combine things, you combine forces. There might be happening more of that than I know of, but is there a reluctance in the industry in general, or has there been a reluctance to sort of join forces to expand their offerings?
That's a great question, man. Yes, and not way less so now than I think in the past. Maybe that's just me looking through the lens of my own experience, but it seems like people are a lot more open to it now, and there's reasons for that. And one of the reasons for that is there's been as some people may be familiar with, quite a bit of consolidation in the music technology space, right? So you'll see, private equity firms buying multiple companies and putting them under the same umbrella, right? To really try to build up kind of what Landr, even they do admit this, kind of innovated on, which is, the most value under a subscription that you can get. You could, one example of that is some of my favorite companies, Native Instruments, and Isotope is an example, right? And you could add, they've now acquired obviously other companies under that umbrella as well, Plugin Alliance and so forth, but really trying to buy up companies and offer a lot of value to customers. Now, what they've found, and I don't want to specify Native Instruments for this, but it's harder to do that than you would think, especially, and this is not even something we've delved in too much, when you're buying different companies with different products, different technical debt, different, people working in different countries. It's very hard to kind of unify that into a cohesive company, much less a cohesive offering for users. So what you see now is when people are on the outside of that consolidation, the companies that are still independent, they kind of have banded together and have been more amenable to doing partnerships, right? Because either you're going to get absorbed into one of these larger companies, or we're going to need to work together so that we can all continue to innovate and grow. And that's what you've seen over the past, I would say, 5 to 7 years.
Yes. So like, if you want to really simplify it, like there's examples of consolidation that these independent companies might not find attractive for their trajectory. Yeah. Again, I didn't know about the Plugin Alliance and Native Instruments, but to the degree that I know them, they seem very different, both in branding and sort of, and they might be supplementary, and that might be an acquisition. I've used their, pretty much all their tools for both of the companies. And
same.
The reason I went to Plugin Alliance was very different than I went to Native Instruments. And there might have been strategy behind that. So what you're saying is there's maybe an interest for independent companies to band together more to stand stronger in not being acquired.
Yeah, I've certainly seen, again, as somebody who's been actively trying to do partnership deals for the past 8 or 9 years. Yeah, it's and maybe this is, I know this is the case because people have told me that's the case. And I'm sure there's other factors as well. We alluded to a factor earlier, which is we've seen the rise of a lot more independent companies as far as in the creator tool space. So it is getting more competitive as well on that side of things, not just in kind of the consolidation of these larger companies. So I think in general, unless somebody is a direct competitor to what you're doing, I think people are less hesitant about kind of exposing their user base and doing co-marketing opportunities or even, co-branded stuff to try to, maximize the value you can offer people and then you can get from them.
Yeah. No, and it can be successful, and let's go back to Oak Sound and what they've done with Avid now with the live mixing desks. I think that's really interesting. One of the things that I love about, one of the things that I are looking to in the music industry right now and really hope will happen, I think is happening, is the concept of data tokenization of startups, for example.
Really?
Like you having some companies might own some data, and then they can sort of share with other companies so they can succeed together. Because the music industry is not a great place to build a startup. Let's just be honest. It's super difficult.
No, it is
it's
not.
hard to raise capital.
You are correct.
And then sort of the factualized nature of how the companies normally, exist together or not together is an issue. We're trying to sort of win our own battle, but each of these battles are so incredibly hard.
Yep.
So what I'm seeing, or at least a lot of talks about, is sort of being beneficial to each other. Do you see this as well, like on a broader level outside of production tools, is happening, or what's your read of that?
Well, yeah. Now, in the case, your case, you're bringing up data. What specifically you're talking about?
Let's say we've had a few podcasts where we talk with, let's say, for example, people very much into blockchain and have existing companies that are sort of saying, okay, we have data that's very important within our specific product offering.
Yep.
That data can be used many other places, but, we can't really monetize it because it's outside of what we do.
Yep.
So we would love to sort of tokenize that data and have other use cases that the companies can build upon and have our share of that usage.
Yes. The short answer to that is yes. I've seen some of that and involved in some of those conversations that are ongoing at present. But yeah, and it's that could mean a lot of different things, right? It could have to do with tokenization and blockchain. It could have to do with training data on the AI side of things, right? Which is obviously super topical at the moment. With people, it's you might think you have a lot of data, but you don't have enough data to train a proper engine model, depending upon what you're trying to do. But if you were to somehow be able to, all throw into a pool, you could accomplish a lot more that you would individually be completely locked out from, right? So, or certainly wouldn't be able to compete with a major label or some other entities. We keep talking about these larger companies that have access to tools and to, finances and whatever. A lot of the smaller companies like us don't. Yeah, that goes beyond just doing, traditional partnerships. Data is a thing. And right now, data is incredibly valuable, right? And also something that people need to take very seriously, because you can really destroy your brand if you mistreat your users' data or do things with it that they do not agree with. So there's also that side of it as well. There's the optics and ethical component of it.
On that point, that was a beautiful transition. Landr recently launched a fair trade program.
Yep.
And can you tell me a bit about that? Because it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like, as a technologist, there's a bunch of stuff that I want to see exist that involves generative AI. And I think generative AI, the term AI at this point has become a very triggering term for people, to the point that I almost don't want to use it anymore. And especially when you apply it to music, people who have anxiety about it, understandably, by the way, associate that with somebody like, a 5-year-old pressing a button and getting an Elton John song, right? So now there's no need for Elton John anymore. Or some variation of that, right? There's no creative input. We're all being replaced, that type of thing. And sure, that could be a use for it. And maybe we'll talk about why I don't think that's the case. But there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can build with that would give people like me and you as music producers superpowers that literally I've been hunting for 20 years. So I want to do that, and we as Landr want to do that. And the only way to do that is if we have data to do that, right? You can have models all day long, but the data is the special sauce. So we launched something called Fair Trade AI, the Fair Trade AI program, I should say, because we're a music distributor. We have distributed millions and millions of songs, right, to the major DSPs, Apple Music, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to our users and saying, hey, if you would like to opt in, right, it's your choice. You don't even have to, don't do it if you don't want to. We will build some cool tools. We'll train some models on the data that you opt in, and we will do a rev share on all the sales related to those models, or the products that we build using those models. And it's early days for that, and we only launched it, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago. But the response has been like way beyond what I would have imagined. Right? I thought we might catch some shit for it, right? Because people are just kind of nervous about this space, again, understandably, but because I think the way we approach it, because we've been in the space for so long, right? People, I think, at this point trust us. The proof will be in the pudding, obviously, with the tools that we build. But the response has been great. We've had tons of people opt in and are growing the database to a size that we will be releasing products later this year. So super excited about that.
Amazing.
And it's stuff that creators, we're building quickly products that the people who are giving us their data will want to use, right? This isn't for like some completely different space or something like that. We're building smart tools to help people produce music quicker and better, hopefully.
It's amazing. I have so many thoughts on sort of this area, and
I know you do. I'm interested.
Creativity, what the future creativity will be for musicians, creators, and sort of who will be the winners and who will be the losers, if you can sort of frame it that way. But if you very simply could put, as simply as you can, what do you believe AI's impact will be on creatives, more specifically on people who might use your products? Producers, engineers, songwriters.
I don't think, history is littered with disruptive technologies that have come along in the music industry, right? And some of those, I won't go through a laundry list of them, but you can all imagine everything from the gramophone to the player piano to digital technology, synths, drum machines, et cetera, right? Some of those streaming, some of those have had a much greater impact than what was, they were underestimated as far as the impact they were going to have, streaming being one of those things. And some things have been have had less of an impact than people thought they were going to have. So it was overestimated. I would say drum machines and synthesizers were going to get rid of drummers and, specialized players. I think AI is going to sit somewhere in the middle of that. This is my opinion, right? So, no one knows the answer to this. But I don't think it's going to be as disruptive for music producers as some people might think it's going to be. Now, it is in the immediate future, it's going to, we're going to see a proliferation of, AI-powered plugins and workflows and things like that I think if you're already making music, it's going to make your life easier doing that. And like, Donald Glover says, allow you to make mistakes more quickly, which I think anything that lets you do that is awesome. I don't see it as something that's going to be a replacement for musicians or producers. I don't think that's what people really want to use it for when it comes on the fan side of things. As you know, there are places where it's going to disrupt the industry, and that's going to be probably on the sync and commercial music side of things for advertising and whatnot. There are opportunities that we as creators, especially that mid-tier of creator, have that may be lessened by this. And I think there's other opportunities that will appear as a result of it. But that's kind of a rambling ass answer to your question. But I think like everything, there's going to be a good side and there's going to be, I guess, a bad side, but like there always is. Like people conveniently forget that the only reason they're able to make music right now is because of massively disruptive technologies that pissed off the established players 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years and beyond ago, right? Like we're all participating in this because we can make music on a computer, right? Or we can blah, blah, blah. And this is kind of another step in that. Is it a little different? Yeah. But ultimately, I think human behavior is not different. And I think I think it'll be okay. I'll just say that.
Interesting. It's really interesting. And there's so many differing thoughts and predictions of what's going to happen. I think yours is one of the more optimistic ones I've heard.
Yeah.
But again, I think that's also really refreshing to hear, since this is sort of what you do and what you live and breathe.
Yeah, and I understand I've listened to some of your perspectives on this as well, and I don't disagree about that being a potential outcome, but it all remains to be seen. I mean, I guess it depends where we think the threat of AI is coming from. Like, if it's going to reduce opportunities for producers, like people, again, that kind of middle class of producer musician, where are those opportunities going, right? Is it that fans, the average person, can now press a few buttons and make music? Is that really the thing that's going to take away from them? Is it the, more professional opportunities? Like where is the leak in the dam going to come from?
A new interesting perspective. I was talking with a startup not too long ago, I think last week. I'm not going to get into what they do, but
sure.
We're talking about AI and sort of how they use AI in their product they're developing. And one of the things we got talking about is retention, in a way that in order for technology really to be interesting and have an impact, it needs to be something that retains people in it.
Yep.
And there needs to be stimulation. There needs to be a sense of mastery or accomplishment. And sort of as a lot of these things out right now that are very generative. Of course, they can develop and iterate, but the sense of mastery and retention, I can imagine, isn't going to be that satisfactory for consumers. I think it's, there might be an essence of, I have something I want to be expressed, and to some degree it does it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, we want to feel accomplished about what we do. And
yeah,
I don't know if it's true, but that's one of the most interesting conversations I've had lately about it. Like, if you can introduce an element of like mastery, or you having a big impact at the output,
yep.
I'm doubtful whether or not it's going to stick for a long time.
Yeah, like I agree and disagree. So I agree that the mastery thing is a key part to retention, 100%. And these tools right now, I mean, there is a novelty to them for a minute, but I think, again, that long-term retention, maybe not so much right now. I mean, the thing that I enjoy the most, not just about creating art, but what I appreciate about the art that other people create, especially that side of it, is when they do something that I feel like is beyond my grasp, right? They have an idea I didn't have. They can do something on a guitar. I don't want to sit and watch you play the same blues lick I can play, or worse than me, right? I want to watch you do something better than me, and I appreciate that. If it all is kind of this kind of even muddled playing field, I think it's not as exciting for people, but the tools will evolve. So we'll see how much, how much agency people continue to be able to have with these tools, so that there is longevity to that engagement. And we're talking about people who are, there's way more other uses for generative music, specifically outside of targeting people who want to create music, right? And through that lens. But then again, and I guess you could almost look at it like through the lens of video games, right? Where you have people who are all about the mastery of playing a game, and there's other people who just kind of want to participate, and there's a community around it. And I think that's when you look at platforms like, let's just look at Suno and Udio and what their business models are, at least that I'm aware of. That's a big part of it, right? It's not just a place for people to go like generate some music and then take it to TikTok or whatever. It's really trying to build a social platform for the creation of, sharing of, and listening to of AI powered music, right? And that's kind of what they're going after to get that retention. It's a platform play more than just a tool.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And like, one of the reasons why I love talking about this so much is something happens every single month.
Yeah.
And
or day.
We're really living in it right now. And whatever predictions we make or senses we have, they'll most likely be wrong to a big degree.
Pretty much.
And I think that's the interesting thing. What I'm really trying to hone in on right now is I'm trying to understand, so what are the things that will not be disrupted, or as things are disrupted, what will be more impactful when it comes to the creator? I have a few thoughts on it, but I can try to ask you.
Get it going.
As a question.
Start me up. I want to hear you first.
Okay. So my working theory is skills are generally going to be less important.
Yes.
For the average person.
Agreed.
Or producer or whatever. So that's going to decrease in value to some degree. So if you take away skills, what is the most important thing about music? I believe words such as context, words such as taste, but most importantly, storytelling.
Yeah.
Is the most important things. And not just storytelling I was having a discussion with another company today about, AI generated music, and they were talking about, now you can create stories with just creating a song. Like, that's not what I mean by storytelling. Yeah. I mean by having a consistent narrative over time that people can connect to. So I believe that's going to be even more important. And for me, that's kind of exciting. Because one of my frustrations as let's call it maybe a taste snob once in a while, is just like, so what are you saying with this music? I think that's going to be really interesting, whether or not people lean into the underlying storytelling more. And that's my assumption. It's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I completely agree that my talking point for the past 6 years or so has been that we're heading into a period where we're taking something from DJ culture, which is that curation is creation, right? So
it's an amazing analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, this idea that if you have taste, right? If you can make choices based upon things you like, which we can all do, we do that when we wake up and make breakfast for ourselves, right? But if you can do that in the context of music or art or whatever we're talking about here, that you can tell a story. And again, I would say the same thing. A story isn't kind of the way that people traditionally think about it, but yeah, you have something to say, and that's valid. And this is another case, and this is just another step in the march of technology and the democratization of access, that we are opening the funnel up for more people to come in and be able to tell stories, right? With a lowering of the barrier of technical skills to do that. But again, people who act like that's some big shocking thing, the only reason you're probably participating in the industry you're in is because that barrier was lowered in the generation before you, right? Like, it's why we're all able to do this. So I'm not super afraid of it. I actually, in a lot of cases, welcome it to a degree, right? Because the blessing and the curse of this is, yes, now you're going to be able to impart your taste. And if you can say something that other people identify with, I don't give a shit how you made it, right? I don't care the tools that you use, if it got you to something that moves you and therefore moves other people, right? It also means, of course, that some people can push a button and spit out a song, right? And don't just do that in mass and maybe not care. But there's always going to be, I don't want to call them bad actors, but people that want to use technology for things maybe other than what they were intended for, in a way that we don't deem ethical, right? So we tend to focus maybe too much on that, then we need to regulate that, blah, blah, blah. But I love the opportunities it's going to open up for people to tell stories that we otherwise would have absolutely never heard, for a variety of different reasons. I think that's when the dust settles, that's what we're going to take away from a lot of the advancements that are happening now.
Amazing.
Like a director. You're a director, man. We don't talk shit about directors, right? What does a director do? Director isn't a cinematographer. He's not an actor. He's not a scriptwriter. He's not a screenwriter. What is he doing, right? He's directing the ship because he has a vision for something. Like, why is that, right? It's something we're all going to be able to do if we choose to, in various forms of media.
I've said this a few times on the podcast, but I started music rather late. I was 17. I knew how to play guitar. I was a pretty decent singer. And I started doing music production and sort of lived with it full time. I went all the way to do a master's. But I quit making music for several reasons. But one of the biggest reasons is that I couldn't express the music myself.
Right.
I wasn't a good enough musician to be a producer sitting at the laptop and sort of playing the bass or sort of understanding all the complexities of harmonics. And I didn't have I've never really had a rich music background. I grew up in a very close-minded religious environment, and I didn't really have the breadth that all my colleagues had. And I just said to myself, like, this is too much uphill. I don't believe I can have a career. And what I was very good at is facilitating.
Yeah.
Because I could always put bands together and teams together. But the problem with that is it was too expensive for me to run that business, right? I needed to pay the bass player and the guitar player, and I need to have that guy. So I stopped doing music. And for some time, I was a bit bitter with that.
Sure.
Like, I love creating. And that's why I do startups, because, for me, I couldn't sustain a living from being a creator in music, but I could stimulate myself with creating music-related startups. Yep. But when I see my profile now, I'm like, I believe that could be one of the perfect profiles for the future of music creation. It is a person who understands how to tie all the pieces together. I'm working on a project, and I haven't really spoken about it,
Cool.
but I'll do it openly on the podcast now, and I would love to give your thoughts on it.
Please.
So, I've been thinking about, as a sort of startup guy, so what is the biggest problem? What are some of the biggest problems I believe is in being an artist, songwriter, producer? And the things that I've identified is it takes a lot of time, it costs a lot of money, and the income potential is very low, and the success rate is very low. All those combined, pretty shitty career, most likely. But the problem is that people are so driven by passion that they will risk health and sanity to get there.
Right.
I think that is both beautiful and sad. So that is, some of the problems I see. So if you were to hypothetically or practically, which I've experimented a lot with, use AI, generative AI, to alleviate some of those problems, how would that look? And sort of what I've done, for example, I've used a lot of generative platforms. I like Suno the best right now for several reasons, but I've made around, let's say, 5,000 songs with Suno. And one of the projects I've been working on is I've been saying, okay, assume I would have a artist that was really good stories. I love the lyrics. What if I would take that artist's lyrics, maybe tweak them a bit, and be very thorough with the prompts and the music prompts, and say, okay, I take your beautiful lyrics, which is your storytelling. We agree on a direction you go, and now I just start really, really prompting a lot of songs.
Sure.
And what I've come with, and I've done this for several projects, is like come up with, maybe after I've prompted like 500 songs, I have 12 songs with 12 different lyrics that I think this is perfect for you. And that's a starting point for creativity. And I know there's complexities with copyright clearance, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of gray areas there. But in theory, I believe when you talk about Don Clover with Fail Faster, this is a very, on the edge case. It's a way to work with, if you have intention within lyrics, if you have taste, if you know what you want to do, you can use these tools to create very strong starting points. And
Right.
What I've done, for example, for these hypothetical projects or less hypothetical projects, over like a matter of days, creating an album, like this is not perfect, but this would have taken you years to get here,
Sure.
just this starting point of your expression. So that was a lot of things. It's a lot of controversial things, but could you please give me your thoughts about that specific case?
Just to make sure I understand, so you're taking lyrics that an artist has written and effectively creating various derivative works based upon those lyrics,
Yep.
right? So it's not the exact
Yep.
same lyrics in every song, but it's different kind of takes on a theme sort of a thing, or is it the same lyrics
So
in different music?
I use exact same lyrics.
Oh,
so
great.
I would
So-
have, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, this is, there's tools that do this now, right? You can go out and put a song in, it'll separate the vocal out, it'll keep your lyrics, so you can transcribe the vocal, do with a different voice model, and then replace the music underneath it. So out of one idea, you can get, in theory, an infinite number of effectively remixes or derivative works out of that, for kind of, and kick those out to streaming. There's some, long tail benefits of that. Like labels, I'm sure, love that idea, right? The idea that you can really get, I do as well. I mean, the idea that you can experiment quickly. Also, just on the commercial side of things, right? You can target different genres and markets, so you can have your K-pop version and your blah, 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 all from an initial idea in a way that would have been completely unscalable previously, including in different languages. People are doing this now, right? Where they're getting 50 versions of a song in, 10 different languages and, as many genres as they want. Some genres that don't really exist. I mean, if you look at Suno, look at all the different genre mashups they have there. They're not always necessarily, they don't always work, but it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
So no, that is the future of a lot of content, is people just try to maximize the most amount of value they can get out of an idea, as possible, because you said it. And I'm not saying I agree with it or not, but I think that's the future of where we're headed. It's an incredibly difficult industry to make any headway in. So if you can kind of up your odds of striking gold, right, then off of an idea that you really believe in, then why would you not pursue that?
Yeah, and then, who would benefit from this, right? Let's say you have multiple artists doing this. Like, it comes back to, are you the storyteller? Like, can people connect to you? And I think the interesting thing about the superfan economy, which I'm getting very tired of that term, but
Yeah.
I love the sort of the meaning behind it, is basically you have individuals who attract people and communities, and there's a way for them to engage deeper with them. And I think if you would make the creation of music easier, creation of ideas or whatever, it still comes back to the point, are you a person that can gather people around you? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Is it true? This is my thoughts. I
No,
don't know if they're true.
without question. Well, you make me think of a conversation I had recently, which is there's also the counter argument to some of this would be, specifically what we were just talking about on the, derivative, the various versions of songs using the same vocal as an example, is your ability to gather that group around you, does that come from kind of a single source of truth, or are you diluting that by having so many different takes on a core idea? Do you know what I mean? It's like this idea of adaptive content as an example. Like if we can all watch a movie and it's a little bit different, customized for your taste versus my taste, are we then getting that shared experience that gathers community around a piece of art or an artist, right? And are we making that easier, or are we making that more difficult? And I don't know. It was just a conversation I was having recently. It's like, I don't know. Anyway, there's various ways to. This is a rabbit hole we can go down, but it's fascinating because people are trying. That's what we're doing, right? People are really experimenting along those lines.
Yeah, I'm also very doubtful about sort of these sort of versions of songs, even though that's also having commercial success outside of AI generation.
Yeah,
I'm just more talking about if you have the opportunity to more quickly come to a result. That can inspire you to create a finished product.
Totally.
Because, when I started prompting with some of these things, I'm like, when I became good at prompting, because that's also an art to it. Like you need to sort of figure out how you can steer
within the limitations of the particular model that you're working with. Yeah.
I would say, this song or this songwriter who would done this would have a very good opportunity to be signed by a publisher. Like it's already there where I believe the output, at least on like, if we take away the AI bit, that is the level of a semi-professional. And great artists that are standing out might have something to say. It's going to take them years and years and years to get there. So it's just interesting to see what's going to get shortcut and what's going to stay, what's becoming even more important.
Yeah, sure. And again, there are commercial uses. Look at the sync market, right? If you're able to pitch a song in a variety of different genres or forms, right, so that it works better for a piece of film/video, right? That's something that you will increase your likelihood of getting that gig, right? So I don't know. There's all sorts of directions you can go with it, but yeah, super interesting. And the interesting example of this, right? And this has now been, God, it feels like it's 10 years ago, but it's been probably 4 months ago, was the BBL Drizzy thing, right? Which is where you've got,
I love that.
I love it, dude. Wallonius Hatcher. I reached out to him like the day after that shit happened on LinkedIn, and we, and started chatting with him about like, this is crazy, right? And especially when, initially it was that he got some social clout because he got a shout out from Metro Boomin on Twitter, and then it ends right with him getting publishing on a Drake and Sexy Red track because he wrote the lyrics to that. Part of that song, the sample that they used, right? He's not getting paid for, obviously the AI generated music is not copyrightable, but the lyrics he wrote are, right? So he's getting a check because of that. And there is, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there's literally not a chance in the world that dude would be in that position had he not made use of those tools to do that. It's one of those, you know what I mean? Like he was able to compose this piece of music and stick his kind of comedic lyrics on top of that. He's not going to go hire a band to do that. That's not taking work away from, a guitar player or something like that. But at the same time, we're going off on a bit of a tangent. I was wondering if that was going to be a catalyst for, so much more AI generated content on the music side of things to be in the market. And everyone who's a beat maker is now going to sample AI tracks because they can make their own, they've got all the ingredients to make whatever they want. They're crate digging, but in a different sort of a way, which is, I guess, how Google is kind of positioning themselves with their AI tools on the crate digging side. But I don't know if I've seen that, right? I've seen a rise in the use of AI tools, but I haven't seen the massive explosion that I expected. Suno and Udio have a user base, sure. Refusion, launched their iOS app a couple of weeks ago now, which is amazing for several reasons, but they've not seen this like wild adoption in users. I don't know. Well, we still have to see where all this stuff lands, but Go ahead.
Sort of my thoughts and interpretations of that is sort of the people who are established and successful already have an existing workflow.
Yeah, 100%.
That they're not, anytime going to change like drastically. And the people who are upcoming, or let's say the next generation, like, me or younger, I'm slowly getting older. I'm 31, right? I started doing music, very seriously when I was 17. I haven't really experienced the disruption in music creation other than, just having stronger computers. Like it's, my computer was slow 14 years ago, it's faster now. Like that is,
Because you came in
really
after streaming was a thing, pretty much.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
that was the biggest
you did.
disruption. So,
Yeah.
for my generation or younger, I think this seems much more scary than for people who have been in the game for a long time, because they might understand they might understand sort of the changes that's happening, or they also understand that it's not that just easy to replace me. It's also relationships, it's partnerships. Like there's a lot of things that goes into being a professional creator.
Yeah.
Um, that might be right. It's at least the thoughts. I think because when I talk with producers, and I do that a lot, that are young, 25, right out of college, have a dream, they're shit scared. And I think
sure.
that also might be why they're slow at adopting this. And I think tools like Landr, making sort of a pivot back to that conversation, it is one of the most interesting things of bridging the gap between that sort of what seems almost artificial to what's actually practical, what they can take and make real music with.
100%. And that's how a lot of this stuff works, right? We see, you take the Sunos of the world, right? They're not coming into this industry and trying to like embrace the existing music creator tool space. They're trying to do a different thing and really address and kind of make a new market, right? And that's cool.
Okay.
But what they've done is freaked everybody else out that's in the traditional music industry, right? Including these up and coming producers who are kind of scared about the repercussions that's going to have. Well, what we now get to do, right, now that we've had this kind of shock value tool that is absolutely useful for certain people, now take the data part out of the equation, that will get resolved at the end of the day. We now get to kind of backfill and pick out the best parts of those type of technologies and figure out what can we actually make that benefits, that I would use, that you would use, that a 25-year-old producer would use. I mean, an example, and this is the thing that excites me, not to go off on too much of a tangent about this, the most about this, is something we've all been trying to do with various tools forever, which is how can I take static content and make it malleable, right? And not just have my favorite song, get different versions of that or have it change to my heart rate when we talk about adaptive music, but like, I'm used to working with loops and samples, right? Loops and samples are static things. Well, why can't we have those things? Why can't we in-paint? Why can't we out-paint? Why can't we get what was a static 4-bar loop and have subtle changes or dramatic changes as we try to build out a horizontal arrangement or a vertical arrangement, right? Having things that adapt to the context that you provide them. Like there's tons. I mean, this is how all DAWs are going to work in the next 5 years to 6 years. DAWs are going to be a little bit slow to adopt, but these independent companies, the Landrs of the world, other companies are going to build the plugins that are going to fit into these kind of more old school tools to give them the superpowers that we all want, that will take us out of what has been a box that we have been in for a while. On my soapbox, limitations breed creativity. We love that. But the idea that I have to work with loops or even MIDI, right? You can only do so much with that. So to be able to take something that I like and make infinite versions of it that I can then curate and influence, I think is going to allow us to make potentially more musical music at the end of the day using AI, something that people look at as sort of a non-musical tool. So there's a lot of cool shit that's going to be built with this stuff.
Amazing. So what I take away from this conversation is you're optimistic.
I am. Without at all turning a blind eye to the impact that this is going to have on the music industry at large. But yes, I'm still optimistic about it because I think it just fits into, most of the other advancements we've seen in the industry. And I think I've been in this world long enough, in the AI world for almost a decade, and certainly the wider music industry for three times that long. That's my assessment, and will happily be wrong about that. But regardless, it's not going to impact how I go about my day to day, and the music that I make, and wanting to help other people do the same thing.
Amazing, Dan. This has been a really good conversation.
Yeah,
I love deep diving into some nerdy stuff. Like I miss music production, and one of the reasons why I miss music production is you can, on such a detailed level, do changes that you can see changes stuff in music and understanding the nuances of music. And I think for a lot of listeners, it just might seem as one thing, but it's really interesting to also know the process of being the storyteller or storytellers behind, of making all these things fit together.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say on that is I don't do as much music production these days as I would like to because of all the other stuff I'm involved in, but music doesn't have to be a job. right? We've kind of established this threshold where everyone wants to be an artist because of social media, because we took down the gates of major labels, being the ones who distribute music, right? And with streaming and all this, everyone feels like they can participate and somehow there should be a financial reward for that. Making music is fun. Like, I don't play basketball because I think I'm going to be in the NBA. I do it because I legitimately enjoy it, right? Or anything else, gaming, what have you. Like, there's reasons to make music besides feeling like you have to put the pressure on yourself to build a career out of it. That can happen organically. It cannot happen at all. And all of those things are fine. So I'm all for like empowering people to make music more easily. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to equate to them becoming, Beyonce.
That's such an interesting perspective. And do you believe why that might have been the primary, let's go barrier for people creating music, or that expectation is because the barrier of entry of skill has been so high? Like, it's, if you want to do music, it's really hard to just,
you gotta commit.
feel casual about it, because you got to commit, like, no matter what. You can't just, do it for 2 months and then, like, that was very pleasant.
Yeah. Well, now what we are seeing, I mean, look at what's being done with music creation in Fortnite and Roblox, right? We are going to continue to see the rise of the casual music creator, music where creation in and of itself is the fulfilling side of it. It's not even the output necessarily. It's the process that you're doing in a community with, with friends, gamified, not gamified, what have you. And those things, there's a place for that content to live in game, on social media, maybe streaming, who knows, right? But it's not all at the same level, right? And people's aspirations around music shouldn't all be that way either, right? So I think we're headed into, that's a whole separate podcast, but we're heading into a future where that's a thing too. And I'm super excited about that as well, man. It's like anything that gets people to engage with creativity. I said this earlier, I don't give a shit what it is. If it lets you feel like you are surprising yourself with something that came out of you, like, that's where real engagement comes from, regardless of what you then do with that, whether it's a product or it's just something you did for fun.
I love that. I'm not going to go down that direction, but I really want to. One of the things I'm thinking a lot about, and I won't go down it, but I'll just want to say one comment, is music in general is undervalued when it comes to sort of comparing the income of the industry, the livelihood of artists, and what impact it has. And one of the things I'm very curious about is what are the elements about music or music creation that's going to increase the value overall over time. And I think, to the interesting point of, you love playing basketball, that might be one of the contributing factors of really increasing the value of music, is if people can partake in casual creation and joy and partake that economy. Is that something you think about?
Well, yes, and I'm not sure. It depends on exactly what you're saying, but like the people participating in creating music casually, whether it's using AI or not using AI or whatever, I do think increases their appreciation for people who actually do it seriously, right? Like you get, once you have a little inkling of an understanding about what goes into some of this stuff, I think then, and how that leads necessarily to more money flooding into the industry. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff, obviously, you can do with fans and licensing and branding of an artist's content, but I don't think it hurts. I'll say that. So, I don't see it as a detractor at all.
I'll think more to the point and come with a better question next time. But it really leaves me with some thoughts. Daniel, this has been beautiful. Thank you for taking your time. What you guys are doing at Landr is really interesting, and your perspectives on the field is also really interesting. And I really appreciate you taking your time.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. I love the podcast.
Great. We'll talk soon.
Cool. Peace. Be good, man.